Around the Table with Vickie. Just like gathering around the dinner table with loved ones and friends, we're here to share stories, insight, and inspiration.
Yeah, I mean, like Dad said, you have to have an interest in whatever you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think to something that gets you up, gets you excited. You go to bed thinking about it. You wake up thinking about it. That is a very true statement. I will often, right when things get settled, I'm like, so what's next?
That's absolutely true.
I like to go. I don't like to sit still. I probably got that from both of y'all. So I blame you two for that. But yeah, just to piggyback off what Dad said, I mean, you have to have interest. You have to have love for what you're doing, and to sit there and dream and create, and come up with the next steps or the next. I'll always tell people, they're like, well, what keeps you excited? Well, it's progress.
Mm-hmm.
The word progress to me is everything. Whether it's a small progression that day, you're working down your email list, your task list, progression somewhere. We have to be moving forward. If you're not making progress, if you're not getting something off your task list, if a construction process isn't being done, you have to make progress. So I love anything that I can progress forward. But even also piggybacking, I think people would enjoy to learn how people-driven both of you are. I'm not sure people realize that, because I heard Dad mention it, and I have so many questions flying through my head right now, so it's hard to even stay on track, but it's just super exciting, and I hope listeners really love kind of what we're talking about. But you two are so people-driven, probably to a fault, I'll say, about giving staff members 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th chances. Like Dad said, getting refueled by those around you. So kind of talk about how important that team is around a entrepreneur or around a CEO that they surround themselves with. Because that team can kind of recharge or drain you at times.
That's
and
absolutely
I think that's super important for somebody starting out.
Yeah, one of the things I've learned is that people are not robots. And I can remember in the very early days,
taught you that?
you taught me that.
That's my
because
point, yes.
I wanted all of my employees or the team that I had around me to be able to operate exactly how I operated, when I wanted to operate, and to the degree that I wanted to operate. And it would be very frustrating because I knew that we had to hurry, right? I mean, Tim Tebow and I had a personal conversation about this not long ago, that time is so short here on this earth. And all the things that we want to accomplish, and of course, Tim's into 70 different nonprofits, and he goes. But it was fun to share that moment with him whenever you understand from one entrepreneur to another that we got to hurry. We got to hurry. We don't have a lot of time to waste. That we're only in our 40s for 10 years, and we're only in our 50s for 10 years, and we're only here, if God blesses us, for 80, 85 years. And so everything that you've got on your mind that you want to do, and you have this many businesses and you're running this fast, you've got to be able to hurry. Well, it's important to create a team that surrounds you that not only can move when you move, but can hold you back when you need to be held back. And so I think it takes some personal investment in your closest team members, having them to your house, helping them understand who you are behind the facade, right? And how you need their support no matter what. It's hard to find people that can keep up with this family. And that's been the majority of our frustration, is we don't stop. And I don't necessarily recommend that. I mean, your dad and I are starting to slow down a little bit. And, that's some of what you have to give up whenever you're in something like this.
Yeah, I remember so many times, growing up, Dad would have, 19, 20 different things happening all at the same time on the same day. And I remember hey, not everybody can keep 19
right.
different
It's
things
sort of a
going.
rush, though. I mean, back in the day when you're younger, and it does change as you get older, you prioritize. But when we were younger, the more things you had juggling around the whole thing of trying to
The better it was.
Yeah, make all that work and make it fit in and be successful. And again, it's important to have people around you that elevate you with that. I'm always sort of say too is, you always wanted to have people that sort of got it right away. And sometimes it takes people to learn what you want and how you want it. And I always say, sometimes if you get somebody that gives you 75%, that's what you take. Because again, I always said, not everybody, people aren't a robot. You can't program them to do the things that you want. It'd be great to come in and say, I'm going to hit some buttons and you're going to do the right thing. But that's not how things really are. And you have to accept sort of people where they are. And then you also got to know if they really don't elevate you or bring you to what you want, you have to make those tough decisions. You have to cut them loose because it never really gets you where that you need to be.
What's been so great as the kids got older, and they're not kids anymore, but anybody listening to me that has children in their 20s and 30s, they're always going to be your kids. But as you all began to get older, you all were able to adapt to the idea of what we needed. And so now you all, the three of you, have become our inner circle. And that's such a blessing as parents that have, developed this business that, you all will step into one day and slowly starting to do that now, is that I can hear you when you're talking to our inner circle. It does me so much good to hear you say, now mom's never going to go for that. Or you might as well go ahead and do that now because dad's going to ask you to do that. So you all have become a buffer to that team, the three of you, to where you can look at a group of people and say, I know she's not going to go for that, or I know she's going to want to do that. Same thing with your dad. And it gets done a little faster now because you're that liaison.
It works great. I use it all the time, actually. I was like, hey, listen, this is exactly what mom would want to do, or this is what dad would want to do. And people do tend to get it done quicker when I say that. So
it does help.
It's great. So obviously in entrepreneurship, there's a lot of challenges, that people only typically talk about all the great things, but there's also a lot of challenges that come with entrepreneurship and sacrifice and lessons learned. So what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced throughout business, and how did you overcome them?
Good question. I think this sounds so crazy, but when you're young and you're in you get a couple things in a row that work for you, you get this mentality that you can just accomplish whatever you put your mind to it. And there's a lot of truth to that. If you push yourself and, maybe you don't know everything, but you learn, you read, you surround yourself with folks that can help you get to that point, you just keep struggling. You get knocked back sometimes. You don't achieve your goal. Something doesn't happen in the time frame that you want. You just keep going. I know there was times where I always had these, I'm a goal-driven person where I make a list every night of what I want to do. And
you do.
And, then you get to work and things happen and they don't get done. But
you come home and say, I didn't get anything done on my list.
So,
yeah.
but it helps me know what my focus is. And sometimes you just got to know that, it takes longer sometimes to get to that. It's always great to know what your goals are, but you just got to know that you're making progress. It's measurable. But sometimes you put unrealistic expectations on how fast something may have to happen. It's not always, it's the journey that you take and what you learn and the people that you're with that often help us grow. And I think that's helped us in the wisdom that what we've done as a company sometimes, that you've learned from your past. Mistakes are good. Sometimes when you make a mistake with something, next time you don't turn left there, you go right. And, you just got to learn from that. So there's nothing wrong with making mistakes, all of those kind of things, those setbacks. Sometimes you have this master plan and you have it all sort of mapped out how it's supposed to happen. It doesn't work. But maybe sometimes it wasn't the right timing.
I think for me, the bigger thing is for me is that I've had to learn how to give so much of myself to so many people. And I don't like to let people down. So if somebody wants me to make an appearance at, a birthday party for one of the seniors, or I need to acknowledge a staff member that's been there, and I've worked a full day and I'm just really tired, it's been hard to say no. And so, you face health challenges when you push your body so much. And so for me, that's been the biggest thing, is knowing how to give myself to the things that I'm supposed to give to, but then to hold back some for my family, because you guys always came first. And so it's been really hard through the years to know how to get so much of what everybody needs done at the same time. So saying no is hard for me, and I've had to learn how to manage some of that.
think it's been unique for us because our business is, our kids are involved in everything that we do. They all have their own sort of niches. So as things that we've done have grown, it became more of a family function. So it was never, I don't know, it never really always seemed like work. It just seemed like what we did every day. And so, whereas maybe in most people, the husband has a certain job, the wife has something else. And it's a different perspective because you're doing your thing and you're in your own world. I mean, I think it has helped us that the strengths that you have, the visionary, the things that you create. I'm more of the back door of the business side of stuff, the financing kind of stuff, that we bring different things to the table. I think I definitely can say the things that you brought have made me successful. I hope you could say the same with me because, we had each other to sort of lean on when things were hard, when things got tough, when something didn't go what it was. You were encouraging, well, tomorrow will be better. Maybe it just wasn't the right time for that kind of stuff. To me, that was always helpful to have that kind of person that could help you, just, help you through that stuff. Whereas I think maybe if you were a person who worked at a factory and your wife was a school teacher, you couldn't,
Two different worlds.
You couldn't support each other. I do think the fact that, and a lot of people say, how do you do that? How do you work with your spouses and stuff? I don't know. I'm not saying it's always been easy, but I'm saying that we each have our own lane and we understand that lane and we sort of let each other live in that lane. And I think that's been, and our kids have grown that. I mean, in our companies that they each had the things they enjoy doing. I think they've evolved with that too. So that's unique with us. And I honestly think that's probably one thing that has helped us to be successful because I don't know other couples like us that have done the things that we've done. That sometimes that for us it's been a plus. I know having you to lean on and things that I've needed.
Thank you, honey.
Yeah, sure. I don't tell you that enough, probably, but I
Say
think
it one
that,
more time.
Okay, but having that
It's
kind
on
of
the
thing,
radio. It
That's
makes
right.
up for it.
I'll replay it.
Yeah. You got a recording.
there you go. But it does matter, at least in us, to have somebody there in your. So when you go to those confidence, those people to say, what do you think? You trust what they say. They've been there. They're battle tested. They've done the things that you know. So it definitely means that, that kind of stuff. I think that's been a big help for us.
Well, leading in that leads in great for the next questions because I was going to ask how important is kind of the mentorship. And I know that's been crucial here, more recently, the mentorship of others around you in your lives to kind of bounce these ideas off. You've referenced your lawyer team. Would you say mentorship or anybody looking to get into a business, that creating a good team or those mentors, how often should they reach out to them? What should they ask for?
Anytime something does not feel right within your gut with what you're doing in business, you should always go and sit down and say, hey, I just need 15 minutes, and we're always popping in and out doing that. We just need 15 minutes. Read this over really good and make sure we're not exposing ourselves too much, or make sure we haven't missed anything. And if it's something that he or I just look and say, I just got a feeling about this, we'll go and get advice. And so definitely as young entrepreneurs that are just starting out, don't ever try to tackle something that you're not educated on and that you don't have a good feeling about.
I agree completely with that. I think you got to go with your gut a lot of times, because you can make things work. I mean, when things happen, if you're driven, you can do things to always try to, at least have a good ending. But if you, from the start, just have a bad idea or it doesn't make sense and you try to force it, it's never a good thing to try to force something that doesn't work.
And always, protect your exposure. Because once that starts getting depleted, you have nothing to kind of fall back on. So stay away from deals that would overexpose you.
Well, I just think it's wise to have counsel. I think as long as people put aside their pride and I don't know everything.
Right.
I mean, it's really hard to know everything in business. And I think that's one thing that I've, as you're trying to learn everything you can. Whether it's a tech side or a lawyer side or a management side or a leadership, it's really hard to understand everything.
And if it's a business you want to create and it's just not in your wheelhouse, number one, think long and hard before you do that, because you need to be an expert at whatever it is you're going into. You need to spend years really getting to know what you want, and then you need to become the expert. And if you can't do that in whatever you're choosing to go into, stay away from it.
Yeah, and I think it's okay to cut your losses when you're into something and it's not working. I'm going to use an example from us back in the day, but for a period of time, you were into retail.
Yes.
And, she had these great ideas about, she's fashion conscious, and she had some friends that wanted her to do stuff with fashion. So she had this great idea of we need to just do these little boutiques. And, with her, you just can't start with one. So we had one, and then somebody else came up with something with two. And before you know it, we had three. And we were in this world of, merchandising and retail. And it wasn't for us.
No,
I mean,
it
we were in that about 2.5 years. And about that point, we were saying, this is just too hard. It just isn't working. It's not what works for us. And we
On a side note,
we
though,
were
I
smart
still
enough.
get a lot of women that would
I
love for
understand
me.
that
so-
too. But it just wasn't what works for
No,
us.
it wasn't. But we found how we got out of that was we found a point
Yep.
to where we were at a break-even point, and we just walked away, which was awesome. But I do still get a lot of people that would love for me to get back into that. Dear.
I know, but maybe that's something that and you learn from those things that you just but there are valuable lessons that we learn from that we can apply to other kinds of things.
Absolutely. Well, and the kids, I mean, you guys went to market with me, and we had a lot of great family trips in Atlanta and different places that we would go.
And not. I mean, this is a cool way of looking at it. It's not a complete failure because you look at what you learned through those years of ordering and purchasing.
Now we have pro shops.
And now the exact same thing, the same concept. In the golf pro shops at Ivy Hill and Ashley Plantation, it's the exact same process.
Right.
So even growing up and, putting tags on clothes and putting them in the inventory system, it looks a little different these days, but it's the same concept.
Right.
So I'm still able to take the knowledge of what I learned with you all and apply that today. And I'm like, well, what's the minimums? I knew all that already. So, it still
Come
kind of
back
worked
around.
out.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I guess the point I was trying to make too is that not everything always works.
No,
I
it
mean, when
doesn't.
you do
Well,
something,
that-
I would say if a door opens, you should explore it, and you get your first vibe is when you get an opportunity. There's a lot of value in that. You sort of have a gut feeling as to how it gels with you and all the obvious things that you evaluate. But when you walk through it and all the when you check the boxes, it all checks. You continue to walk through those kind of things. But sometimes when you walk in something and you go down the road, and if it's not there, sometimes you just got to know it's time to stop. But you do gain valuable things from that, so that next opportunity that comes up, you really know where to go based on those past experiences.
Well, that leads it right into my next question. Can you share a failure or a setback that you have experienced and what you learned from it?
I can hit
No, but
that.
we really haven't had a lot of failures, and we're very thankful
Yeah,
for
but
that.
to me, and that's true. But I think we have had things that we thought would happen that didn't, but it wasn't the right time.
Yeah.
I mean, I can use the example of Liberty Ridge. I know that when we talked about this before, and I'll just be short on that, but whenever Dr. Falwell was looking at working with Savoy Senior Housing, and we were in church, and we were just, we were growing with things, and we were just getting a step, and we were young. We thought that was the kiss of death, that they were going to come to town, and church wasn't supporting us and everything else. Well, a long story short, we went to all of the meetings, saw what was going on there, but they didn't make it. They failed, and
Created opportunity.
created opportunities for us that down the road. And I don't even know if we could have handled that. We couldn't have handled it there. But when the opportunity came around, we were ready for it. We learned from it, and timing wise for us. So it just wasn't. It was just not then.
I still think that if you stick with what you know and it becomes a passion, then leads to a profession, that is a recipe for success. So no matter what you're trying to get into, if it's something that you truly are passionate about, all the downtime, all the little ripples in the road, it ends up working out because you end up being an expert at that.
And you find ways. I mean, you want to learn, you want to explore things, you want to read about it, because your passion. I think that's you should definitely pursue things that you have a passion for. I mean, if you have this, sometimes maybe it looks like a great opportunity, but you just don't. It's just you're not feeling it. I would recommend staying away from those kind of things.
It was a goal of ours back when we started to just saturate this market, and I can very humbly sit here and say that we just had another acquisition July 1st, to where we put another 109 beds, care beds, into our family of care. And now, I feel like we do really saturate this market. So a goal that we had 32 years ago, it took 32 years to get to that point. And then just being considered an expert. I keep referring back to that. But when you're an expert, everything changes. Everything changes. Doesn't mean you're perfect. Being an expert does not mean you're perfect. It means you're willing to admit that you failed, and then you turn around and do it better. And we've talked about that a little bit today.
So thinking about an entrepreneur mindset, what drives you to keep starting new businesses instead of just sticking with one?
Opportunity. We talked about it earlier too, the opportunity to create more jobs for people, because we've seen that we can do it. Going from 9 to 480, probably more than that once we get all these new companies merged together here. In the next few weeks with our new acquisition, we've seen that it really can make a difference. Knowing that you're helping somebody put food on their table really does motivate you to keep going. And again, I revert back to what we're really growing in is something that we've been doing for 32 years. And so we really understand the market. We really understand the goal. We understand who we're servicing and why we're servicing it. And so it's that deep call, and ultimately God drives all of that, right? Like He blesses us with the ability to get up every day and to have the wisdom and the knowledge how to keep growing. That ultimately comes from Him.
So, you said you've been doing it for 32 years. I think it's important for people to realize that it doesn't happen overnight. So, how important is it to just stay consistent?
Stay the course. If it's in your mind and God's called you to do it, then He's going to see you through it. And we've talked about that in previous shows too. But it takes an enormous amount of commitment and faith to get to ultimately what you have in your mind as your end vision with your company. And once you get to that end, if you've reached your goal, then it's time to either sell or get out or pass it on to another family member, because then you can say, I've reached my goal. And ultimately, that's the end game for everybody that's an entrepreneur, is reaching your goals. And then once you reach it, for us, we just keep reaching higher, because we don't feel like God's finished with us. There's been plenty of times over the last 8 years. We always said once we turned 50 that we were going to really start slowing down and enjoy the things that we had tucked away and properties that we've bought that we hardly get to go to. But God had something else in mind. And you remember me telling the story that, I was sound asleep and I audibly heard God say the word more. It was about the time I was ready to settle down and say, okay, God, I've reached my goals. I've done everything that you've called me to do. And He audibly said the word more to me. And I had to go through a series of about a year of Him breaking me to where I understood it's not time to stop. He didn't say it's time to stop. That was my desire. I was wanting to do a little thing, called retire, because I felt like I've been blessed. I can retire at age 50. That wasn't in His wheelhouse of thinking. It was in mine. And so you have to understand that we have an idea of how it's supposed to be in this world of entrepreneurship, but God's ways are higher than ours. And when He says still keep going, we have to be willing to do that. And when that happens, blessings just keep coming out of the windows of heaven.
Sure.
Yeah, but I also think in that too that, granted, we've been doing this for 32 years, but not every day is peachy keen. I mean, you're going to have struggles. Things are going to, come up, challenging times. I mean, any business, I think we've been talking about a lot of positive stuff, and we've been blessed with a lot of growth. But in those journeys for every person to get from point A to point B, you're going to hit challenges. You're going to hit things that you've learned.
The word pruning.
Yeah.
That God loves to put us in the pruning years, and we can identify them. And you can, now that you're 34 years old and lived through some of those years, you will say, I actually heard you tell a staff member this not long ago, Christopher. You said, you got to be careful when we get in these pruning years, because we never know when God's done pruning. And then after that, you better hold on and buckle up, because we're in for a huge growth spurt. And inevitably, I can think of 3 times that's happened in our company's history. And so it's been exciting to watch God prune and then God watch it grow back so much
That's a really good point because, I mean, we're talking
fuller.
about all this positive things and growth and blessings that you have, and those are all great. We're trying to focus on that. But part of the journey to get to that is you do have to go through some challenging times, some struggles where things don't work as you planned. You have a master plan and you have it laid out, but it doesn't always work that way. And
Well,
you have
God
to
has to
adjust.
prune
And
you back.
you're right.
Yeah.
And I think all of those during the time, the valleys, we haven't really talked about that, but there's always valleys in a business, in a marriage, in a friendship, whatever. Those times are part of it as well, and you have to endure those. But you're true. I think some of our biggest growth has always come out of those periods prior to that when there was some
Well, I think what
pretty
it
needed.
does, I can sit and say this personally, is it just makes you so thankful. It makes you thankful, number one, that in the valleys, that God's with you in the valleys just like He is in the mountaintops. And when you're on the mountaintops, you don't always need God.
Yeah, that's where I was going to try to go too, because I think it gets easy to almost have this superhero mentality that you can just do it all because you've done this stuff and you have this which is good. You know that you have the ability and the desire and the will to do things, but it's ultimately God's blessings that
And
make
I
that
love
happen.
so much that the times that we have gone through that inevitably, we'll have an employee come in and sit down and share with us what they're going through. And we're able to say to them, the valleys are just for a little while. God's going to move you back to the mountain. And some of our employees don't believe and don't understand. And then they'll come back a few months later and say, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So, I mean, when you've got that many employees, they really do look to you for guidance. So I think going through some of that has really given us an upper hand on how to deal with some of
Yeah,
those
but
things.
I don't want to really also have this perception that everything is always going to be, because it doesn't happen that way. There is always challenges, and challenges do help you grow. And sometimes you wonder, did I make the right choice? And maybe you didn't, but you need to take that experience that you have and make it work and learn from it so that the next time that doesn't happen. But
Well, a really good business person is always willing to take a risk, especially if it's something that you truly believe in. And I've talked a lot today about being passionate about what you want to do in life when it comes to being an entrepreneur. And part of being a good business person is willing to take that risk.
Yeah. And I always think I've said this to you multiple times too. It's really, you're talking about staff members and you're talking about pruning. To some of us, some of our key staff members throughout the years have actually come to us during those pruning seasons. And I remember, sitting in interviews like, why is this person here? They're way all overqualified, or why would they leave the job that they were at? And I always kind of look at you now. Now I'm able to recognize that, and I'm old enough to see it. It's God always sends you those right staff members during those years, and I kind of get scared whenever I see those because I'm like, okay, we're setting up to be launched in a different direction. The pruning season's almost done. God's lining up those key players for us to then hit the ground running. And that's always really encouraging for me to see. And it's pretty cool,
It
quite
is cool.
honestly.
And then when we go stand in the spaces, you know, to where we had some challenges getting there. And then you're standing in the space of a building or a group of residents. And then you revert back in your mind of how hard it took you to get there. Again, God brings us to our knees in order to, shoot us to the stars again. And it's easier to be launched when you're in a lower position than it is when you're up a little higher, right? And so I feel like that, again, whenever you get to the spot that you're trying to get to and you're struggling a little bit, when you finally make it, when you're standing in those areas, when you're standing in the space that may have caused you a little pruning moment, you're so much more thankful. And being humble and being thankful is the only way God will ever truly use you. He's not going to use somebody with a haughty, arrogant spirit that doesn't really give him the praise. It's in the lowest of the moments that God forms those personalities of praise.